Judy gave me a wonderful introduction. Thank you very much. And I also want to invite you, she's going to put my website in the chat, but you can also contact me by the website, or it's Marilyn at marilynroseart.com. And afterwards, we can unmute if there are questions that you didn't get to ask in the chat. So I am going to talk about painting from a photograph, but my feeling about painting from a photograph is a lovely quote I heard, and I can't attribute to anyone because I don't know who. I might have been Eli Whitney, who said the flight of the Rimsky-Korsakov's Flight of the Bumblebee was a translation, not a transcription, right? So I always tell my students, if they have a wonderful photograph, blow it up on the wall and hang it on the wall, right? To me, when I paint from a photo, I'm not just replicating the photo, but I'm trying to make it into a painting, into something more. And it's not just because of ego, you know, like, oh, I don't want to copy because I work from my own reference, but it's also, it's the opportunity, right? When you're working from a photo, it's like you have your head in a metal box and you can't move it either way. And the camera distorts and everything else. When you're working from a photograph, and that's why I insist students work from their own photograph, you're bringing your experience of that place. So I am going to now spotlight. You should see my desktop here. Everyone see my desktop? Let me just, my messy desktop. Okay. And I took a few, often I will do, during a demo, I will take the photo and I will do the thumbnail, and then I will do the painting, but it gets a little nerve-wracking. So I decided I was going to do that ahead of time. And I did two different thumbnails, not knowing which one, and I've decided on doing this one. But as you can see, it's not just that I change it from horizontal to vertical, but even in this one, there are some unfortunate tangents here, you know, where everything is pointing to this tree. And so I've moved things, right? You're really talking about shapes. And so this is the photograph I chose to work from, and I did a horizontal, and I finally decided on this vertical and this composition. So I do my little thumbnail, and a lot of times, the other thing about a thumbnail, people say, well, you know, I'm just copying the picture, but not only does it help me place things, but it's almost pre-seeing. I see things in a different way when I'm holding a pencil and doing something than I do if I just were to glance at it. So this is a picture that I took in Nicaragua about 8 years ago, and it was in my pile of pictures. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I should paint that. So I've never painted this before, but I've decided to do it. And you could even see from my thumbnail, I moved things over. In other words, if I were just to crop this, you wouldn't have the entire tree or the majority of the tree. These things wouldn't talk to each other. And a very important part to me when I pick a subject and do a composition are the spaces between things. And I always urge my students not to think of it as objects, but as spaces, as shapes, and the spaces between them. So that said, I did my drawing, and I did the drawing rather quickly. I actually did it twice because the one time I did it, these things were up a little too high. I didn't feel like I looked at it, and then I looked at my thumbnail and I said, it doesn't feel as dynamic. And then I realized I had much more up here. So, and when I do my thumbnail, you can see it's kind of a messy sketch, right? And I purposely left a lot of lines. One of the things I find that when I'm drawing it, if I draw something and it's not in the right place and I erase it and draw it again, almost always I end up with it in the same place. So a little trick I found is if I draw it and then draw it a second time and then erase, I found where it belongs, right? And I'm not replacing it. So this is my, and I'm particularly careful about edges, right? So in other words, instead of just doing a circle for a clump of bushes, my pencil kind of dances and it gives me a little clue as to how I'm going to treat it, right? Not necessarily filling in those lines, but how I'm going to treat those things. So this is where I'm going to begin. And when you're working from a photograph that you have taken, you have a whole lot of knowledge about that photo that you don't even realize. I remember the day I was there and what it felt like, and it transports me back. So the atmosphere here, it's not a real sunny day, but I probably am going to make it a little brighter because I can, right? And I am going to first work on a sky shape because all of the sky is going to have blue, and it's going to be a purpley blue. I'm going to have, here it's white, but I'm going to add a little more color to it. But I know that all the greens have blue in them also, so they can go on top of the sky shape, right? So I like to say that when you're doing a watercolor, and I'm talking to watercolorists, but when you're doing a watercolor, it's almost like clay and an armature. When you're doing not a watercolor, I'm sorry, when you're doing an opaque medium, whether it be oil or acrylic or gouache, and when you're doing a watercolor, to me, it's like chiseling stone, right? And I'm chiseling out the whites. So I'm starting with, I have a cerulean blue here and a drop of quinacridone magenta and water, okay? And I'm going to give myself a nice little puddle. And if you can't see something, or Judy, if somehow my palette slips off, or you can't see something, Judy is going to watch and tell me, or you can in the chat ask her to have me move something down. All right, so I'm going to do, skies are always darker on top, almost always. And I'm going to go for kind of a magenta-y, it's a grayish day, right over most of the tree, right? Might leave a few little whites. And one of the reasons I like to use cerulean in my sky is because it's a granulating color. And I love that granulation. It helps. Now I was a little heavy with my pencil so you could see it better. So that's going to get a little dirty, but it's a dirty kind of day here anyway. So see that nice little granulation bit. And I'm going to bring this down. And while I'm bringing this down, some of this is in the tropics. This is in Nicaragua. It's a very uncivilized part of Nicaragua that's right on the border with Costa Rica. So the other side is all nicely maintained, and this side is really not. My cousin was in the diplomatic corps, so I got to go all sorts of interesting places that she was posted. But this was not a place that you normally would tourist. Okay, so I'm going into my greens, and my green is a mixed green. I do have sap green on my palette, but I also have greenish yellow, which is a lovely mixing color, and it's a Holbein color. Most of my paints are Holbein. The only exception is the Daniel Smith. I have burnt orange, but otherwise I like to stick with the Holbein colors. They stay very tacky, and if you look, this is a very light wash I'm putting down, but normally my colors are very sticky. You can see they're almost like toothpaste in the tube. I don't want to have to work too hard to get those paints out, those colors out. All right. So normally I don't like using a hairdryer because I like the paint to do its thing. But since I have such a big wet sky, I'm going to have to. But let me first try to work down here a little bit. And again, I tend to work the whole painting. A thing I like to say is that my paintings, it's like when you do a puzzle, right? Yeah, I'm a big crossword puzzle or jigsaw puzzle person, mostly crossword. And you do the obvious parts, right? You do the edges, you do the parts that you know first, and then you do the rest. So I'm going to start with this. These people happens to be my cousin and my sister. Mm-hmm. And we've just gone hiking I was taking the picture, so I'm not, okay. But I'm letting the paint do a lot of it. The people are important, but they're also incidental. I'm not going to put in details, features and things, but I am going to do them early on just because I'm waiting for other things to dry. So, and what really took me is the light on these people. So almost everything I do is with this low Cornell. Let me just get a piece of paper towel. I have I think a 10 and a 14 or 12 and a 14. I'm very upset they stopped making them. Don't tell me when I'm about 20 of them here. If they stop making, grab them. But it's an inexpensive brush, but it makes a really nice point and it works really well in all sizes. So I'm going to take and I'm going to do a shadow, right? And the only kind of right part of this is the top of her shirt. She's going to kill me because I didn't take some pounds off of her, but and as it goes down, oops, it gets a little more nondescript. So I'm mixing cerulean blue and some of the red that was on my palette and what I like to call palette schmutz. I don't know if anyone knows that word. It's the dirt of the palette, but they give you really nice colors. I work with a fairly limited palette because I find that if you work with colors that play well together, you don't have to work so hard. I think I'm a lazy painter in some ways. And so if I could do it in one brush stroke, I'm going to do it in one brush stroke. All right, I just want to put her in. And there's an interesting little silhouette here because they give you these big boots that you put on and put your pant legs into it. And the reason they do that is so the snakes don't get you, because this is really the jungle. Okay, so again, and the posture of the people is important, but not necessarily the details, right? It's how you see things. You don't necessarily see all the details. I just saw something in a magazine or whatever, and it says, don't paint the fleas before the dog. And I think that's so true. And it's very tempting to paint the fleas. Okay. So I'll come back to them, but I just wanted to get them in so I don't paint over them. Well, let me bring her shirt down a little bit on this side, that color, and I can differentiate later. Okay, I want to make sure I keep her escape. So this is starting to dry a little, which is good. And I guess I can go in without the hairdryer and go back in and put some of this background back in. So again, it's going into wet, so I'm working with a lot more pigment than water. And I'm going to go back into my kind of cerulean blue and my quinacridone magenta. I'm getting into a nice little grayish kind of indescript color, being aware that everything is going to dry lighter, but it does look a little heavy. We'll see. One of my pet peeves is the coastline has to be horizontal, right? Water does not go uphill. If your water is going uphill, it probably means that the camera was tilted, and you don't. It's very disconcerting. All right, I've got to go in with this strip of foliage. I think I'm dry enough there, so I'm using sap green with that kind of purple I mixed up before. And I'm going to go in for dark values here. And again, whenever possible, I like to use the marks that the brush makes. last week in my class, I talked about the top 10, the top 5 watercolor, important things about watercolor. And one of them was an economy of brush strokes, of color, and of I've got to think, brush strokes, color, and shapes, right? And if you can say it in one shape, then, paint it as one shape. So I'm not painting all the individual leaves. I'm painting a shape that's like leaves, but the edges of them create the leaves. So and whenever possible, I like to let the medium create whatever it is, right? So my brush, dancing brush. Okay. Where do I go next? I'm going to run the hairdryer because I'm afraid that's wet. So excuse me for a moment. Again, this would be a good place to go get a cup of coffee. And that way I'm letting the painting kind of continue to work, but I don't have that luxury right now. So Judy, are there any questions?
No questions yet, but I wanted to ask, you're working on a tilt, right?
I always work on a tilt. I like gravity to help me with the angle, right?
Yeah.
I think that helps avoid blossoms, and the tilt is gravity is helping me. I can pick it up and move it, but I find that I don't get the pedaling. And I'll show you a real my secret. This is my brand new.
Oh, cool.
It's a laptop stand.
Oh.
Again, if you have questions about any of these things, if anyone wants to email me, I can tell you brands and things like that. I bought this a couple of months ago on Amazon, and I think that they're having a run on them because all of my students are buying them. They fold real nicely, but they don't slip. I always had books under it or something, but it works really nicely.
That's
so
cool.
Right. So again, I'm trying to channel Homer, right? Homer and Sargent did such wonderful palm trees, right? And again, one of the mistakes I think people make when they do trees is they first do the trunk and then they dress it. I like to tell a story. My poor son has, he has his own kids now, so he's old enough that I guess I'm allowed to tell this story. But when he was little and he would paint people, he would paint a stick. He would draw himself. He drew a self-portrait. He'd draw a stick figure, and then he would take and draw genitalia, and then he would draw underpants, and then he would draw clothes. And it's because it's what he knew. And that's the way a lot of people draw trees. And I think that's an unrealistic way to draw them. So I like to say, draw what you see, not what you know. So some of these may not even be attached, these fronds, because you don't see them, right? I don't have to put them all. They're shapes that then, okay. I want to make sure I go a little darker. I didn't quite go dark enough, so I'm going to mix up a little darker, and while it's still wet, and I'm always putting a drop of red in my greens to calm them down, right? The complement, but I want to get some darks in the centers of these things, right? And again, I'm using the way the brush moves. So my brushes are my strokes are getting smaller as they go out. So I'm painting in that direction from the base to the smaller. And this side of the tree is darker. So I'm getting into the darker value. And I truly believe in value more than color, right? The value is the most important piece of it. So again, I'm going into this green, and I might add a little peacock to it, but, and the greenish yellow, and it still has a little bit of red in it because I want to get these dark, and I vary my colors a lot, right? So I like to mix on the paper and on the palette and on the brush. I rarely have a whole puddle of one color. I usually put the ingredients on it. This is a fun little palm tree to paint.
Mm.
And there's something about these three, and on top they're a little more upright. And again, all that, I really got to know that when I was doing my thumbnail. Now the center trunk, I'm going to take my yellow ochre, but I'm going to add it to my green, right? Trunks don't suddenly turn brown. They kind of go from one color to another. Actually, I'm going to put in a little bit of my Daniel Smith burnt, quinacridone burnt orange in here too. So, but it changes color, and as it goes down, and then this is in front. So I go back in with some greens. Okay. So it's got a nice dark to it. There's another thing here, but that actually is another tree behind it, and I don't need that other tree. It's a different kind of tree, but there is another frond. Okay. Now I'm going to go in some of these other places and see what I can accomplish. So I'm going in, I had some of the red from my figures on there. I'm gonna try to make a nice grayish, again, instead of talking gray and brown, I like to talk neutrals, and I like to talk, you know, like it's a more greenish gray or a redder gray, you know, rather than like you have in your head what a brown is, and that's not always a good thing. I just realized, okay, this goes over. I lost myself in this drawing. I guess I was so busy. All right, I see where it is. This is the trunk. It's a little green. So going with a little more magenta. So the water's peeking through, but those. You know, if I do this right, the painting kind of paints itself. Okay. Now what I kind of forgot about almost was this dark band behind them of foliage. So, and I don't want to, I want to leave her hand. Right, so that's this jungle foliage. And I'm going to paint right through the staff that she's holding, and hopefully right now I can grab something pointy. Oh dear, what do I have here? Just the end of this stick. Let's see. All right, I pulled it down. I thought I was going to get lighter there, but at least I pulled down some of that stick. I'm going to go into the darks in here. I'm not used to it being so quiet because I run my classes. I like to run really small classes so that I can leave people unmuted. And so there's a lot of interaction during my class. So I have this feeling like maybe everyone walked out.
No, we're here. We're fascinated.
Okay, whoops, I'll take my stand here. All right, it's gonna take a minute to focus again. I'm gonna come in with that slip of bluish, purplish land there. Again, I think I can usually do a painting with like 6 colors. I don't have a lot of, I don't use a lot of different colors because I don't think you need them. You know, again, I think if the colors play well together, it does more for, so that's that color. And well, I have some of this bluish, purplish, whatever. I'm going to do a little bit of the shadow on her shirt.
We do have a question. We want to know
Oh,
how many greens are you using?
I only have 2 greens on my palette, but I've mixed all these. Nowhere is there a single green here. So the 2 greens I have on my palette are sap green, which I've just added fairly recently, and this greenish gold, greenish yellow, but this is a Holbein color. And if you look at it, it's a yellow, not a green, right? So it makes a beautiful orange. This is my advertisement for this color. I call it liquid sunshine. And it can mix with any blue to give you really nice greens as well, including adding sap green to it. But nowhere is there a single green. And I can almost tell when I look at a painting, someone just uses 2 greens. I just find them very hard to swallow. But, you know, I have all these other things on my brush. So even some of the reds I introduce, you know, some of those colors. Okay, I'm going to come back here. And again, I'm chiseling out the colors, right? So this has a lot of cerulean in it, and it's got a lot of some of the red in it. I had made like a gray. Sometimes I'll start with a green where I'll make a Prussian blue and alizarin, or Prussian blue and quinacridone magenta, and it'll give me a gray. And then I just add a drop of either the yellowish, the greenish yellow, or some sap green, and that'll just continue bringing it to okay, I thought I was lost where I was for a minute. Okay, so this is another tree that's kind of interrupting. These are just, and then there's a dark up here that I want to capture. So it's funny, my significant other always accuses me of not finishing a sentence. And I was editing videos the other day for my demos, and I heard myself and I realized I don't finish sentences. So again, I'll show you that wonderful blue. I mean, that wonderful green, which is really, I take a purple. So this is, but I make the purple. So this is my, my dirty brush in my Prussian blue. It already has a little green in it because my brush was dirty, and a little bit of the alizarin, and I get this beautiful kind of grayish purple, and then I just take a drop of whatever green I have in there, and I get this really nice dark green that has nice colors in it. So, and I don't use Payne's gray, and I don't use black at all. So if you'd like a copy, I made a handout that has my palette in it, listing all the brands and my brushes and all my supplies. If you drop me an email, I will also send that to you. So it's Marilyn at marilynroseart.com. So this is coming to meet this, and it's helping to make that shape, right, to relate to the, then into that. So we're getting there. I'm going to go back into the faces while this is all drying. And again, I'm going into the heads, not the faces. So I'm going to take my cadmium red and drop of cerulean blue. And I'm just going to cast the shadow on the face, right? Because she's really in shadow. And then again, her shirt, bottom of her shirt. That's a little strong. Gray it out a little bit, a little blue. I'm just gonna somehow that hat did not, I really want this rim of the hat to be attached to the face color. So I've kind of sacrificed her face. I have to take out that little triangle of color that got into her hair. Now, Robin, this other woman, is wearing a bandana. There's also light on top of her hair. So I got some of the bandana color and just some darks. Again, I'm going to avoid features. I am going to put some shadows in the face. I'm going to go in a little bit of detail. Just a little bit, suggesting something. So she's got this strap across her. You know, I don't want to get all caught up in this, but it's a little bit of calligraphy to just suggest something else is going on. Again, I mixed my dark. I mixed into the Prussian blue, and it was like, oh, that came green. So I dipped into the red that I have there. There, she's got a camera on top. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I want to make sure that a negative paint around that hat. And if I forget, I'm going to come back and fix the hat. It's going to bug me. I don't love the tangent of the line, the shoreline to her face, but I couldn't figure out a way to avoid that when I was doing my, right? And again, just some negative painting to imply other kind of greenery going there. I have to stop and look. That's part of the problem when you're working so quickly here, right? Is it's hard to take the step back. Again, that's what I said about coffee. So Judy, how am I doing time-wise?
Good, it's 10:04.
Okay, and we're gonna go till 4:30. So
yeah, we can.
All right, but I might be, we'll see. Okay. I think I might want to go back into that water a little bit and give it just a hint of something. And I like that purple. I'm going to clean off my palette. And the moves get smaller and smaller. Okay, this needs some work and some of this, but let's go into the water a little. So I'm going to take my, again, my cerulean blue, that's my I Can't Live Without color, and a drop of magenta. But now, because my brush has been a little dirty, it's a little dirtier a color, which is fine, right? Because I don't want it to be a bright So it's not exactly what's in the painting, but in the photo, but I want to indicate a little more of a watercolor there. And now the whole thing is holding together a little more, this shape. Gonna do some work here. Again, some brush work and some nondescript, right? I didn't like the tangent of that trunk there. And this is one of my favorite things to do. Anyone that's seen me paint knows I'm a splasher, or if you've seen my keyboard, because, oh, let me try this. So, let me see what I'm gonna do. This is my way of masking. Lazy person's masking. I don't want to get their faces. Okay. So I'm going to take a nice bunch of different green colors on my, and I want to have some detail in the.
Inch your paper up a pinch. Your paper towel slid down a little. Your paper towel.
Oh, my paper towel.
Yeah,
it's okay because I'm looking. I got you nervous, huh?
Yeah.
Got a few dots in here, but that's okay. Just indicating stuff, right? I take my rigger. That rigger is not clean. There's another rigger. I think there's some stuff across the, I may even, that's my fingernail painting, right? And I wonder why I can't get a manicure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Add a little green to the base of this. No. Okay. I'm gonna fix that little corner, and I think I need some green around her because this is just floating, right? So again, I'm responding to the painting as much as I am to the photo at this point, right? I wanna,
We have another question about your rigger brush. What number was your rigger?
my rigger is a very old, cheap, this one's a #1 black silver. The other one, I think it's chipped off, I can't tell. It's a Simply Simmons, and this might be called a liner brush. They're really inexpensive kind of brushes. They don't have a number. They're not, the nice thing is you don't have a lot of control. They're real floppy. So I'm not gonna sit there and do little brush strokes. I'm letting the brush strokes kind of create, and I want a little bit of an angle in here. So I'm creating it with the paint. And again, I'm really fussy about my paints, and I'm fussy about my paper. I'm not as fussy about my brushes in that they're not expensive brushes, but they make nice, I had some sables and I don't use them. I tend to use this instead. It just has a nice point to it and it holds a lot of water, which is what I want. I had another tree here, but I'm I think I drew it in, but I've decided not to. Okay. And then there's some clumps of stuff here. It's darker down here. And then there's some little red, I think like birds of paradise down there. And again, this is perfect for splashing. I go through a lot of paper towels.
What type of paper do you like to paint on?
I like to paint on Fabriano, and it's 140 pound
Is that what this is?
cold press. Pardon me?
That's what this paper is,
Yeah,
Fabriano
a big
piece?
sheet. And I used to think I needed to paint on 300 pound. And now I'm feeling like the 300 pound acts like a sponge, you know, it doesn't, unless I'm outside. So I buy this online at Jerry's Artorama or Blick, whoever has a sale. They have sales from time to time where you can get 3 packs, not 3, I mean, it's a pack of 5 and 4 and you get 1 free, or 8 and you get 2 free, and they're very reasonable. I have a pencil line going here because I remembered I wanted an angle. So I'm gonna, again, just some calligraphy, some foreground there. Helps bring you in, right? It's all a construct, what we're doing. It really is just bringing you in. All right, so I'm gonna look at it one more time and see what bothers me. All right, so this dark bothers me because I think it needs more on the other side. Sometimes when something bothers me, it's not the thing that's bothering me, it's something else, right? In other words, it was all by itself. And instead of lightening it, I wanted to kind of create that. Ooh, and now I went in, I just happened to take some peacock blue in there, and it just gave this nice little twist of color into the, right? So it gave me both the darker value, but it also shot in a little bit of color because it felt like it was a little dull. Okay. And I want, that's going to dry a little lighter. The top of this tree. We were staying at this lodge in the middle of nowhere. And so like dinner, they'd just climb up the tree and get bananas, and pretty neat experience. Gonna cut through this a little bit. Okay, I'm gonna fix that one little piece of hat, and then I want to see. So I'm gonna erase any pencil that's in that white. Is this dry? Yeah. So some of the whites I erase the pencil from. I don't mind if people see my pencil, but I want the whites to be white. I'm seeing I also need a drop of color behind her shoulder to continue this watercolor. Okay. So here, I'm going to take a piece of tape and I'm just going to mask this little triangle that got in the way when I painted her face. And I want to see if I can get a little brim shape like that. Okay. And I'm going to take my Mr. Clean Magic Eraser and absolutely clean water. This is the stuff you use to take the paint off the walls, the fingerprints. And I just wipe that. And I got rid of that little triangle that was bothering me. But I like the white on her head. And I wish I had a little more, so I may just put a few drops of white. just a little calligraphy, and put a negative paint around her to make her stand out a little bit. And I still want to get those walking sticks in. So I don't usually use white, but I'm going to do that. So I keep a tube of white, but I don't keep it in on my palette, because if I keep it on my palette, it gets into my mix. I end up mixing something in, and I don't like to do that. I do very little masking. I'm trying to find my white. Oops. I lost it. Hold on. There. Okay. I'm just going to take a tiny drop of white on the top of her head. So it's kind of like a shadow. I don't know if that worked. No, I'm not going to use the white. All right. Forget that. Trying to find a little brush. I very, very rarely use a small brush. I have all these brushes and I use the same one over and over again.
Yeah, and what was that one? Because somebody had asked, what brush? Because you seem to have painted most of your painting with that one brush.
Yeah, it's low Cornell, but it's no longer available. L-O-W-E Cornell. It was very inexpensive. It's a 70-20 ultra round. You might find one or two on the internet, but they're gone. And I asked, there's a art supply store where I saw some chatter about the fact that they don't make them anymore. And they asked, you know, what you recommend. They said they would have recommendations. So I asked them what their recommendations were. And they gave me the name, something, but they actually sent me sample brushes, but they weren't nearly, the problem was what they sent me was something where a 10, brushes are not standard sizes. So they sent me a brush where the size 10 was about the same as the size 6 or 8, and they didn't go any higher. So it didn't work. So I haven't found a new favorite brush. Before that, my other inexpensive brush that I used was, what was the name of it? The Simmons Sapphire series.
Thank you.
Okay, that was just little, I still want to go a little dark here. There were a few other things I wanted to do and I can't remember. Oh, the staffs. Okay, so I am going to go dark on the staffs, even though they're not dark. And then I'll see, maybe I can scratch it a little bit. Yeah, I find it's less distracting to use a single brush, you know, instead of having to, and if the brush, I'll show you something in a minute, the brush holds water. I mean, I'm assuming everyone here is a fairly experienced watercolor painter. I don't know, but I'll show you something about the way the brush holds water. So I want her boots to be darker, right? And this leg. I just want to get a little more contrast into the painting. So if I get her dark here. Okay. So when you're painting, the part of what holds the paint is really this part of the brush. You know, you put your brush in the water, you dry it off, and then you go into the paint. And what happens is this part is wet and it feeds the paint. It's like a fountain pen. So when you are working with really dry paints and you're just putting water on the surface and just licking the surface of the paint, you're not using the pigment and this delivery service. And so that's why you want a brush that holds a lot of water and then has a good point. And the good point is so I can go in any direction I want. You know, I can make the same brush will give me really big strokes, really big strokes, and really little strokes, right? It's how I use the brush. And it's what makes painting with a brush different than painting with a colored pencils or something like that, right? So I think I'm almost done here. Stuff in front, just some detail to bring you into the picture. And, you know, again, now I need to sit back from it and look at it and see where I am. But let's see if I have a mat. I have a mat. Just one's not good. Now you can see my mat is so messy, right? But, and you know, again, the figures don't have a lot of detail. They're part of the story, which is what I wanted. But I didn't want you to be so distracted by them that you missed, you know, the place, which is really what the story is about.
Yeah, it looks beautiful. We have some comments of how beautiful your painting is.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's interesting. I started one of my goals. Oh, I need a little more detail up here real quick. And then one of my goals had been over December was to go onto my website and put up videos. So I now have a little video store where I have some of the demos that I've done for classes. I've edited them, just cutting out the demo part, and they're for sale. But I listen to me over and over again, because when you edit videos, which is a nightmare, you know, you have to keep going back and back. And so one of the things that I noticed is the points that I kept bringing up. And so I came up with, and I'm going to share this with you. Let me just look at my, I have a cheat sheet here. I wrote this down for the class. Okay, so I'm going to share the most important things in watercolor. 5 things that I've decided are the most important. The first one is economy. And that's a little cheap because it's economy in shapes, colors, and brush strokes, right? All of that. The second one is seeing shapes, not objects, including the shapes around the objects. The third one is be cognizant of the amount of water, both in your brush, on your paper, and in your paints, right? Fourth one is look at value as much as color. And the fifth one is plan, but then watch where the painting is taking you. You know, let your materials take you on this journey. So that's my kind of my credo. I kept hearing it over and over again. And that's my painting. So it's the San Juan River.
Wow, that's great. I do have another question. Somebody wanted to know if you have ever painted with hot press paper.
Long time ago, but I have not. And it's not that I don't think you can paint with hot press. I'm not used to it. And I don't think it's as forgiving. I think it's different. I think there's something about these little holes in the paper, these little bumps that help hold up the little pockets for the paint to go into, right? So I just wanted to create that triangle and a little more brightness on that side of the painting.
Yeah, wow.
Okay. So if there are any other questions, I'd be
Yeah,
glad to take.
I'm going to say one more question that was written, and then I think we'll unmute people, or people, can they unmute themselves?
Yes, I believe
Okay.
they can, and then they can ask questions. Absolutely.
Okay, so the first question that I have that's still on my chat was, can you talk about your palette? What is the style and company of your palette? What is it?
Right. So my palette is Jack Richardson. And again, if you email me, I'll send you a photograph of the palette with the different colors and telling you what the colors are. It's a very cheap palette. If you are in northern New Jersey, west Orange, Jerry's Artist Outlet, which is different than Jerry's Artorama on logo. They have these palettes and they're about $6. I go through them every once in a while because they break. Sometimes the hinge isn't great. I had another one and I took this piece off and put another one on. Very inexpensive. I like the layout of this palette, and I'll tell you why. This is an interesting, because first of all, I used to use a Pikes palette, you know, when a big palette, and then when I go out and I'd be demoing or I teach a class, I'd be using sometimes this palette and sometimes that palette, and I want to get so automatic. I know where my colors are, so I like that. And the thing I like about this palette, I tell you, I really, you know, say I'm a slob, but I can close this up and put this under the water, clean that off, close this up and clean that off. I've got a little piece of paint there, I don't know. And then what happens mostly is it's clean. But the other thing that happens, just happens to happen, is that I find that the Holbein paints do not run. They stay sticky. They don't have ox gall in them. So they stay sticky, and I can even turn it sideways and not have a problem. But after I've washed it, it usually ends up, I splash a little water in here by accident and I leave it, and it helps keep my paints moist. So I love this style palette. I wish that someone made this style palette in either a metal or something that was a little more durable. But instead, I just keep buying more of them. And it's Jack Richardson, and it's a medium. And you can find it on Amazon. It's hard to find. And there's also a place called Art Express online that sells them, artexpress.com, Art Xpress. The only thing about the Art Express, is it Art? No, I'm sorry, it's not Art Express, it's Rex Art. The only thing about them is the palette's $6. The shipping is, you know, $8 or whatever. So, and they don't have a lot of professional art supplies. I mean, this is kind of a student palette, but that's my palette and I love it.
Someone said that Phoenix Arts in Doylestown also sells them. So
okay, yeah, you
close
can't
to that area, you can get it there.
Good. Yeah, but the nice thing is that it's got those simple wells and it folds. I found it by accident, but it's really a nice thing to have.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Yeah, if anybody has, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
I just want to say how I enjoy how you processed it, and it looks beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Ellen.
Oh, thank you very much. So this has been a really interesting, you know, switching to Zoom from teaching in person, right? Because obviously you can't go around and sit next to a student and show them, but there is something nice about them being over your shoulder, you know, that is a nice piece.
Yeah, I was very impressed how fast you can put together a great painting, because you did that really quickly. Well, I guess it comes down to how much you plan ahead of time so you know exactly where you're going and what you want to do. I guess
yeah, I mean, there's things that don't work, and I would leave this on my desk and then come back, you know, from time to time and make little changes. But there's also something about the adrenaline when you're doing a demo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Times, because I find I lose interest. It's boring, right? So, but the planning in the thumbnail stage, that to me is the key. If I've worked on a thumbnail, I know whether the painting's going to work or not. So that's really true, you know. And again, there are little things that I might fix or work on, but you can't tell them right now. You know, it's hard to have the distance. I'm just looking for my Mr. Clean. I don't like that little thing. You know, they're little things, but the moves are small. But there is, I'm sure you know this, Judy, too. When you're doing a demo, there's like an adrenaline rush that happens, right?
Right.
That
Yeah.
also is part of it. You know, people say, "Oh, I can't believe you painted that in an hour." Well, I painted it in, 12 years in 1 hour.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. That's right. Also, could you show us again your thumbnail sketch? They wanted to see your initial little pencil drawing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll show you, just since we have so I drew it once this morning. I did this on Friday and I let it percolate. And then I drew it this way and I didn't like it. And I couldn't figure out why I didn't like it. And I looked back at I usually will catch it before this, but I was in a hurry. And the figures were too high up, right? I needed them to be smaller and I needed more sky. So it's a subtle shift, but I think it made for a much better composition, right? So those kinds of things. And those are the really important things, right? To be very critical early on, to do that planning and then let the paint do it.
Somebody was asking if you could explain how you do your Zoom setup, like your camera and your whatever, stuff like that.
So originally I did this, I went online like the first week that COVID hit and was trying to figure out how in the heck am I going to do this? And I found there was someone who showed they taped their iPhone to the ceiling, but they were making soup and then it fell in. Not a good thing. So I have my cell phone. You can see here. I'm gonna highlight. See that this is my cell phone and I have it on a stand, which I can't show you, but it's like a microphone stand. And I cobbled it together, actually. I first had a tripod sitting there. I had a tripod on my desk and I kept trying to find better setups for my situation. Thank heavens, there's a lot of stuff online about now there wasn't at the time, right? But about how you can overhead filming. So I tried with a video camera. I had a very old video camera, but it didn't work and I didn't want to make an investment. So it's just my phone up there. And then I go onto Zoom as 2 people. So if you host, at least you can go, even if you don't host, I think we figured out, you can go on as 2 people. And so I switch the spotlights back and forth. And when I teach my class, I have a third thing. I actually share my screen. I have students email me their paintings. And then I share my screen and use Photoshop so I can show them what if we darken this area or do something there. So that's the whole thing. It's a little delicate balance with this to get this so that it's not in front of my face and it's low enough to show the painting. And I put a holder here at the end of this arm that I cobbled together a bunch of pieces from different things. So it's not one setup. Anything else? Any other questions?
Did you do a preliminary watercolor sketch or thumbnail, or just the drawing?
No, just this little black and white drawing. You know, I look at people who I really respect, like Poppy Balzer from Nova Scotia, because I do a lot of plein air events, like plein air Annapolis and Wayne, you know, where you apply and go. And there's some amazing painters there. And Polly does a full size value sketch in one color of the painting before she ever does her painting, which I just think is extraordinary. And she's made all her decisions. So then her painting just goes. I don't have that kind of, there's something to me, and maybe it's just I'm lazy, but about the spontaneity of watching it unfold, right? So I get bored if I've done it. I mean, I have a few paintings now that I've done 2 or 3 times, but I'll usually do them in a different scale or something like that. So I don't do a full-size value sketch, but I have a lot of information here. And even if the information isn't on the paper, it certainly is in my head, right? And that's important. I really find when I do these, they're almost like automatic sketching where I'm really, really studying the thumbnail. And I have another little trick about my thumbnails, and my students go crazy because I always draw this little box around them. Okay. And the reason I do that is maybe I was going to do a horizontal, you know, and I start to draw the little figures here. And the other thing is I often, like, if you could see the way I'm drawing, I often connect things while I'm drawing them, right? So I'm really kind of keeping track of how my eye is moving around the page, right? How I'm seeing it, right? So maybe this starts to be my thumbnail, and then I'm working a little faster than I would, but still, you know, and then I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this is right in the middle. That doesn't work, you know? All right, maybe I'll add this tree here. Then I'll say, you know what, maybe I'll do this. And I just change my box. I don't have to redraw it, right? And my pet peeve is I'll have a student when I'm in person and they'll have a horizontal thumbnail, and then I walk over and they're doing a vertical painting. And I said, what are you doing? And they said, oh, I changed my mind. Well, you know, you don't know what you're going to do with those spaces. You know, these spaces are the most important thing, not the tree, right? It's the space. The tree is carving a space that is the sky. And that's the most important thing.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay.
Do you use a traditional Fabriano, or do you use the bright white? Do you have preference?
I think I kind of use what's on sale. I think I usually use the traditional, but I know that I have purchased the bright white too. Yeah. It's just a nice paper. I was introduced to it by Charles Reed, and you know, they also make a nice rough, and I have used that. But you get used to one paper. And when you start, I mean, sometimes it's good to switch it up because you're totally changing, but especially when I'm teaching and doing demos, I like to know how it's going to respond, right? Outside, plein air, I like the rough sometimes because things dry real quickly, and, you know, you end up with these little nice little pockets of color on the rough. Okay.
Yes, can you also tell us again quickly your greenish gold that you had? Somebody wanted to write down the name.
Yes, so most of my paints are Holbein, and I have to look for the name of it because I always mess up. It's greenish yellow, which is different than, like, Winsor Newton makes green gold. And the thing is, you'll go into an art supply store and you'll say, I want greenish yellow. And they say, oh, we're out of that. But here, Winsor Newton makes a green gold. It's totally different color. And I don't know how many of you, I mean, a lot of you may know this, but the same color is not necessarily, a Winsor Newton quinacridone gold is very different than a Holbein quinacridone gold. So you have to look on the tube. There's a place for ingredients, but, you know, I'll go to a student and I'll say, you know, you should, I bet that would look really nice using your quinacridone gold. And I'll come back and I'll say, what color is it? And they said, oh, it's quinacridone gold, but it's Winsor Newton. And it's different. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but when you're comparing them, you know, you have to understand that and know that.
How do you get the gray?
The gray?
Yes.
My grays are, I usually start with a Prussian blue and either the quinacridone magenta or the quinacridone alizarin, or the alizarin crimson. So, and then I add a drop of green or palette schmutz to it. Again, the three primaries make the gray. So if it's a blue or gray, it has more blue in it. If it's going to be a lighter gray, maybe I'll use cerulean instead of the Prussian blue, right? But you should know your colors really well. That's why I paint with a very limited number of colors. So this one's dried up. That's ultramarine. I almost never use it. This is cad red and this is scarlet lake. You could use almost interchangeably. Aureolin, quinacridone gold, not aureolin, new gamboge, quinacridone gold, aureolin, yellow ochre, because I use that a lot for flesh tones more than in my general. That's the greenish yellow, sap green, Prussian blue, ultramarine, but you see I hardly use that, cobalt blue.
We're not really seeing your palette.
I'm sorry.
Oh, there, okay.
Cerulean blue, peacock blue, that's the Daniel Smith burnt orange, quinacridone burnt orange, quinacridone magenta, and alizarin crimson. And as I said, I have a handout. If you email Marilyn at marilynroseart.com, I will send you the handout, and I've labeled each of the wells, and also I list the brushes and all of my supplies.
We are only seeing your face. We cannot see what you are saying, this and this and that.
You can't see it. Are you on an iPad?
Well,
No,
no,
I was looking fine. I was watching you fine, but now I only see your face.
I think you're spotlighted on you, not your
I'm
work.
spotlighted on both, and I guess
Yeah,
that,
now we got your work. Now we
Right.
see your hands.
so that's the palette.
Yeah.
So again, Scarlet Lake, Cadmium Red Light, Scarlet Lake, New Gamboge, quinacridone gold, aureolin, yellow ochre, greenish yellow, sap green, Prussian blue, ultramarine blue, but I hardly use it, cobalt blue, cerulean blue, peacock blue, Daniel Smith quinacridone burnt orange, quinacridone magenta, and alizarin crimson. But the key is, you can see they're like toothpaste. They're really wet. And what I do before I start is if they're not wet enough, I just put another little dab of paint on them to activate them. Okay.
And what are your flesh colors for a light-skinned person? Yeah.
My flesh colors are cadmium red light and maybe a little yellow ochre and cerulean blue, but very little pieces of that. So I'm gonna see if I have a scrap. Oh, here, no, I'll find a scrap of paper. Hold on. Okay. Here.
I tend to
So-
my color seemed too orangey with the cad red light, and I guess I'm using too much of it.
Well, it also depends whose cad red light it is, right?
I think,
It's different depending on whose cad red light. That's the cad red light. That's mine. And
and you're using Holbein's cad
Oh.
red light.
yeah,
right.
and that's the with a little bit of yellow ochre in there. And this is with a little bit of, and if it's a person of color, those are all flesh tones to me. And when they dry, they'll dry even lighter, but a lot of water.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm,
And if it's a person of color, I'll switch to either the peacock blue and the alizarin and the quinacridone gold. It's always that triad of yellow, blue, and red. But the red is the base of it, the red and water. So, okay.
thank you so much.
Well, thank